Welcome to this edition of Beck is Talking. If you listen, you want to go and get a pen and paper and take notes, because this is a podcast that really could affect you and your family and your friends, and in this day and age, it can really mess up your life. We're going to try to not mess up your life on this podcast. My guest is Dr. Lisa McKee. Now, Dr. McKee is a cybersecurity expert,
Yep.
and you work out at Bellevue University, right?
I do, yes.
Okay. You teach out of Bellevue, or and what specifically do you teach out of Bellevue?
Yep, so I'm in the graduate program for cybersecurity, and I teach risk management courses, cybersecurity management, the capstone course, which is the last class of the program, which is a research course, and some others. So, yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Okay, now, the reason I know, Lisa, is because I got hacked. I had a Facebook page that got hacked and got all messed up, and we still haven't been able to figure this whole thing out because Facebook, well, that's another story for another day. But basically, and I don't recall doing anything. I mean, I know to be careful what links you hit. I know about phishing emails. I know about all that, and I think I'm relatively smart when it comes to cybersecurity. But somehow they got into my Facebook page, and they changed the password. They blocked me. They changed the email address to make it like virtually impossible for us to, and you can't get a hold of anybody at Facebook.
Right.
What can be done to protect from that sort of thing?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Some of the things that we recommend is, one, make sure that all the information that's in your profile is current and up to date. I had the same situation happen about a month ago with a friend, and their contact information wasn't current. So when we tried to recover the account using their email, it was an old email address when the phone number was one that had been shut off because they have a different phone number. And so it made it a lot more challenging than in your situation where at least the information was up to date. So make sure everything that's in your profile on any social media or any account that you might have online is current, so that if somebody needs to get in touch with you or you need to prove that it is you can do that. Another way that you can protect that account is what we call MFA, or multi-factor authentication. So by doing that, it's saying that you have two ways to validate your login. So first, it's going to ask typically for a username and password, and then it will ask for a token. Either it will text you, or there's apps that you can set up, like Google Authenticator, that will then give you a token number that you would enter into the application.
May I say something about those authenticator apps? Okay. If you have one on your phone, and you go to buy another phone, make sure they transfer that at the time, right? Because I had one, and then I got a new phone, didn't think anything of it, and the authenticator on the new phone didn't work.
Right.
Which then made my life a living hell.
Right. And they're usually set to that device. So even if you transfer it over, usually you have to re-authenticate because it knows the IP address and MAC address of that phone. So that's how it's associated to you.
Is there a difference between Mac and PCs as far as cyber safety? I've been told that, malware and stuff doesn't grow on Macs, that PCs get it, Macs don't. Is that true?
No, not entirely. Anything that's on the internet is susceptible to cybersecurity vulnerabilities. Some just more so than others. We see a lot more vulnerabilities with Windows and Microsoft. They had a major breach a couple months ago than what we do on Macs and some of the OS operating systems. But if it's connected, it's susceptible.
You mentioned the being breached and all the information that's out there. I'll give them a plug here. I have LifeLock. Is that a good idea?
So there's benefits to LifeLock. You can certainly do that. What I do is, I'm a security professional, privacy. This is what I do every day. So I do more monitoring on my own. The best thing that I recommend is freeze your credit report. Mm-hmm. Now, what that means is that you're going out to each of the three credit bureaus, TransUnion, Equifax, and putting in a request. You have to create an account. It's free. And then it locks it. So if somebody is trying to make a major purchase where they're going to have to validate who you are and things like that, and it hits your credit report, they're not going to be able to do that. And they're going to come back to you and say, well, it looks like your credit is frozen, so we can't run your background check, your financial check, and so therefore we can't extend any financial credit to you. That's a good thing. It can be a nuisance if you're making a big purchase, but for the temporary nuisance that it might be to go and unlock it, let them run it, and then lock it again, it's worth the financial harm that could happen and the ramifications. So that's one thing. With another thing that I do is I like Credit Karma. So there I can also monitor. It's an app on my phone, or you can log in on a website. And I like that because then I can monitor it myself. And I can see what accounts are out there. I can see, it'll even tell me breaches that my information has shown up in and what information has been included in that. Is that just my email address? Is it other personal information, username, password, things like that? So then I can keep an eye on that, and I know how to change those passwords and which accounts. The thing with LifeLock, it's a paid service. Now, the things that I was talking about are not. Those are not. And that requires more action on my part, whereas with LifeLock, they're doing it for you. The other thing that you get with LifeLock that you don't get when you're self-monitoring is in the event that something happens and it's significant, then LifeLock will, and other services that are similar to that will fight for you. So they will go out and clear your name, and wherever credit may have been extended, work with those organizations to make sure that that gets fixed. And if your information is out on the website where it shouldn't be, or other ramifications, negative harm that could have come to you, instead of you taking your time and the headache that's come, just like how we've dealt with the Facebook thing, they will do that for you. So it really comes down to, do you want to monitor it, or do you want somebody else to? And then what would that look like?
But you're an expert. I call myself a functional computer illiterate.
Right.
Right? Because I can get my email, I can check the news stories, the news that I can do some banking online, that sort of a thing. But I can't all this other stuff. I did freeze 2 of my 3 credit reports.
Perfect.
And whenever I go and if I'm opening up a new bank account or something like that, or making a big purchase where they do a credit check, I do get a message from LifeLock on my phone saying, "Hey, is this you?"
Yep.
So I feel good about that.
Perfect.
But that's mainly because I can't do that, and I don't think most people can do that the way that the way that you can. So why or how did you get into this line of work?
That's actually an interesting story. Back when I graduated high school 25 years ago, they didn't have the career services like we do nowadays for kids. And so I went into a field that I enjoyed, and then quickly learned it wasn't for me. It wasn't something I was going to enjoy doing on a daily basis. And after a year of college of trying to figure out what did I want to be when I grow up, I went to the guidance counselor's office and said, where's the jobs going to be? And that was here in town. I graduated from Metro Community College, and that's where they said computer programming. I didn't like it at first. I had to take the intro course 3 times before I passed and before the information really started to make sense to me. And from there, it just got into different areas of cybersecurity. And I've been fortunate and lucky where I've been doing things before they were careers. So I did internal audit before audit became degrees in universities, and been doing cybersecurity before that became degrees in universities. So just right place, right time, some of it. So yeah, that's how I got into computers.
I also know that, I saw you do this, you do these cyber camps.
Yes.
Where you take high school students and teach them cybersecurity. And I was watching you teach these kids, talk to these kids about things, and a thought that went through my head was that one of these little punks is going to end up being the guy that's hacking the Facebook accounts, and you're teaching them about all the security, and I know that at least one of them is going to go and, use it for bad.
Potentially. So as part of our camp, one of the things that the students do is we do a cybersecurity ethics, and they actually sign a statement of ethics, meaning that they will use the internet and technology with good intent, not to cause harm, not to be deceitful, and whether that's personally somebody that you know or somebody that you don't know. So we teach the students not to do that. Now, rightfully, there's always that one that could.
Yeah.
But that's where we talk about the difference between white hat hackers and black hat hackers. So what you're talking about are those bad guys, and we're teaching the white hat hackers, which are the good guys.
Don't the bad guys end up helping the good guys? Don't the police forces that end up using the hackers, the bad hackers, to help them?
Sometimes, and that's what we call gray hat. There's the middle, right? There's all these different terms. All hacks,
Are they
right?
cowboy hats? Are they baseball caps? What are they? Yeah.
So that's what we
fedora?
call.
What are they?
Right. So that's another term that we have in technology, in cybersecurity, and those are the ones that kind of play on both sides, right? They started off as maybe on the bad side, doing it for personal gain. To some people, it's a game. It's just to prove that they can do it. Others, it's monetary. And yes, absolutely, the government and local law enforcement do at times reach out to those individuals where there's a need to, if they don't have the expertise or other resources that they can utilize.
Let's talk now about some of the common mistakes people make. All right, phishing.
Yes.
phishing. Phishing. What is it, and can you be sure to avoid it?
Yes, that's a great question. So phishing is when the adversaries or the bad guys send you an email or other communication with the intent that when you click on it, it's going to direct you to a malicious site that will download malware onto your device. Now, typically that's done via emails. Ways to identify that is to look at the individual that the email is coming from, not just the name. So it could say Tom Becca, right? But if it says Tom Becca at some other unknown MSN.com and you're like, that's never me, or they have these weird names, that's one thing to look at, is not just the name, but what's the actual full email address. When you look at the details of the email, are there things that are misspelled? Because oftentimes these are coming from individuals where English isn't their primary language. So there's things that are misspelled, missing punctuation. It just sounds choppy and doesn't sound grammatically correct. So those are other indicators that those emails are probably malicious emails and not to click on things.
I've also been told that like the misspellings and the bad grammar are a way to keep the smart people away. Because if you notice all the misspellings, you say, oh, this isn't real, and it keeps them away. They don't want to deal with people that are smart enough to avoid it. They want to deal with somebody that doesn't catch it and will click on and click on and click on, right?
That is true. And that's the unfortunate thing about it is they're really going after the elderly who don't know better, and other individuals or even kids that aren't trained or don't know what to look for. Right away, if I get an email like that or something at work, I'm automatically forwarding it on going, this looks like a phishing email. And there are times where companies will do what we call phishing campaigns or Fish Me to see if employees will click on those links, just how well is their training programs working. And I'd rather have them come back and say, yep, that was a test, you caught it, good job, than you fell for it and something bad happened.
Yeah, they had that actually at another place where I worked. Although somebody in the company, thankfully it wasn't me, messed up big time, and the entire company got hit with a cyber attack.
Yeah.
And completely shut down everything.
That's how a lot of the events are happening right now, is unfortunately still through phishing. A majority of the events that we see, and even in the data breach reports that come out annually, are still showing that's how a lot of these are happening.
I guess, is it just a thing where, buyer beware? I mean, what? Is there a way to stop that? Is there a way to stop the phishing emails from even getting to the people?
In organizations, there are software, there are security settings that companies do have enabled to try to catch as much of that as they can. Nothing's 100%. Unfortunately, as individuals on our home systems, it's not, we don't have a lot of those technologies enabled, and a lot of them aren't geared for daily, at home folks like you and I. So yeah, it just depends. It's definitely a challenge that everybody is struggling with, for sure.
Where does this end up? I mean, it's got to be, got to be just incredible. If you find yourself that somebody has hacked into your computer or has hacked into one of your accounts, what do you do? Where do you turn?
Yeah, so first thing is, depending on the situation, right? If it's your home network, you can disable some of that from the internet. Make sure that your Wi-Fi, we're also seeing compromises through Wi-Fi. So most individuals at home are running Wi-Fi so that you can use the internet all throughout the house, and all your family's devices and printers and everything else can connect to the internet. What people don't always know is that you can go into those settings and change the default settings. So they come with a default username and password, but you want to go into those and you want to change them, because those defaults are often out there on the internet, and that's another way that those hackers are getting in.
When you say default, you mean the default on your router and that?
Yes, on your router. Yeah, a lot of times the password will be on the bottom of the router. There's a barcode, and then the password's right there. And it's not hard to guess what those passwords are. And if you don't go in and change it to something that's more complex and that's only known by you or maybe a spouse or other family member, that's what they're doing.
I guess I just assumed, and we know what happens when you assume, I just assumed that on the router, when they give you that password, that each one had a different password, but it doesn't?
They do. A lot of them do have different passwords, but it's still a default password that is not complex, that's usually pretty simple and short and easy to remember. And we know on the cyber side and with research that those passwords take milliseconds to crack. So if you're not going in and changing it to something that's at least 14 characters long, complex passwords, the likelihood that they can get into that is higher.
What about passwords? I mean, we see that, weak, medium, strong. But you just said 14 characters. Is it that much now? I mean, most of the time they say it has to be at least 6 characters or 8 characters, and you're saying no, do 14.
Yeah, the new guidance and standards that came out a couple of years ago does show that the longer the password, the harder it is to crack, and the more time it takes to do that and for it to be compromised. Also with it being complex passwords. So uppercase, lowercase, special characters versus, my name is Tom.
Yeah. I hate computers. I hate them. How often should you change your password?
So the guidance is 90 days typically. Some of the new guidance says that if you have a strong password with multi-factor authentication enabled, that you no longer need to do that. Now, I was just reading an article, ironically, this morning that talks about a layered approach to security, that even if you have MFA enabled, they can still hijack the session and do other things to compromise the account. And that's more on organizational side, where they're trying to get into organizations, banks and things like that. So, yeah.
What can the police do on this? I mean, with my situation with the Facebook, I went and I filed a report to the FBI. And you said, good, Tom, good you did that, but you are so low level, nothing's going to get done.
Yeah, so what you're talking about is the IC3 Gov. So IC and the number 3 and then .gov. So highly recommend anybody that's had any issues, compromise, definitely file a complaint with the FBI. They do log all of that. Now, that doesn't mean that they can look at everything that comes in. What they're looking for are patterns, and they're looking for where there's more people in the same area that might be compromised or having the same types of issues. When it comes to law enforcement and what can you do, you can file a police report locally. chances are they're not going to be able to do much because they don't know who that person is on the other side. So when it comes to like your Facebook account that we've been working on, we don't know who's on the other side of that. We don't know where that person is. At one point, it took me to an international login page where the page wasn't in English, indicating that that person's not here then in the United States. So law enforcement can't go after if they don't know who they are, and especially if they're not here in the U.S. because of jurisdiction. So it's filing it for the sake of filing it. You have record of it. Some places where that's necessary is if there's been a loss of financials. So if they do get access to, say, your bank account, and now, they've wiped out your bank account, that oftentimes is required for the bank to be able to recover some of those funds for you, or at least credit that back.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody hacks into my banking account, is the bank liable for any of that, or am I liable for it, or how does that work?
Yeah, so that depends on what they get access to and how they get access to it. More often than not, that's going to be the bank. Banks are highly regulated, and there's actually right now a class action lawsuit that's going on against a $1 billion bank because they were breached, and it was a breach that could have been prevented, and they didn't do the necessary security requirements to make sure that things like that didn't happen. So there are things that can steps that can be taken, and then you would also have the regulators. So here in the United States, we have a lot of that falls under the FTC, which is the Federal Trade Commission, and they go after organizations for who have been compromised or just gross negligence of not being secure or following privacy laws.
We talked about phishing.
Yes.
How do you know if clicking on a link is safe or not?
You don't.
Oh, that's good to know.
So first you start with the email and look at the email. We went through some things that you can look at there. Sometimes you can hover over those links and it'll give you the URL. Not always is that the case. Where you can do that, I would recommend doing that, because if it gives you a URL that doesn't look right or that's taking you to some site that you didn't know or didn't recognize, those are other indications that that's not a safe email.
Also, a lot of times I know they'll just have one letter that is off the name to make it look like it's a legitimate email, but it's, instead of a C, it's a K, and it's a completely different website.
Yeah. So some of the things that I recommend also, in addition to just looking at the email, if in doubt, call the person or reach out to the individual where that came from and say, I got this email from you. It had this link. I wasn't really sure. So I just wanted, before I took any action, I just wanted to verify with you. Is this legitimate? And if it's the individual says, no, it's not, don't click on it, then that's another way, because you don't always know by looking at the email. The first thing for me is it an email that I'm even expecting? If it's something that I'm not expecting and it looks weird and I'm like, where did this come from? Then I usually don't take action on those. The other thing that I have seen an increase in lately is not just in emails, but also in text messages. So they're getting cell phone numbers, they're getting other contact information, and they're then sending links in a text message that will say, hey, click here to verify your information. Or we get the text messages all the time that says, did you make this transaction? This transaction came through. We think it's fraud. Click here. I don't click on those because I don't know for certain that it's actually coming from my bank. So I will call my bank and say, I got this notification. What's the issue? What's the transaction? And I have had some of those where they've said, yeah, we didn't send that email and everything's fine. There's nothing on your account.
I've had things like that too, yeah. I also get, lately I've been getting this, like these random texts saying, hey, what's going on? Or, hey, are we still on for dinner Friday? Or they want me to respond. And I just hit right away, nope, report, delete, and send those off. Yeah,
and you can block them too. So I actually run antivirus on my cell phone. That's another deterrent that I do that, again, most don't know. But being a cyber professional. We do that on our workstations, laptops, desktops, but we don't always think to protect mobile devices the same or equally to those other workstations, when in the reality of it is we have more sensitive information on your mobile device more likely than what you would on a laptop or workstation at home.
I refuse to do any banking or anything on my phone. I do online banking, but I'll do that at home with my router, and that's it. I'm on one computer, and that's it.
Yeah, and you're probably one of the in the minority that does that, because most, and especially younger generation, does everything on their phone. They don't really know what desktops and laptops are the same that we grew up with them. So they're doing a lot of things on their phone. So that's one thing that I would recommend is definitely run antivirus on your phone, and then it will flag some of those as well as spam, and then you can even block them from there.
What about like Apple? You mentioned that Apple Pay and stuff like that on your phone. What liability does Apple have in something like that? If I've got banking information or Apple Pay on my phone and that gets hacked, does Apple have any liability? Am I out that money? I mean, how does that work?
So this is where I say I'm not a lawyer, but I know a lot about laws and I do a lot of work in this space. That's where there's a fine line, because then it really gets down to, where did the compromise happen? Is it because they got into Apple systems and access something on the back end where that information may have been stored, or is it because they got into your local device where it's stored locally on your phone? And so there's different laws, and there's different ramifications, and there's different points of liability depending on what that access and entry point is.
Now, speaking about phones, if I'm at a coffee shop and I'm doing some work, I'll never say never. I very rarely use their email, or rather their internet. I will use my hotspot on my phone. Is that a smart thing? Is that a dumb thing?
No, that's fantastic. So definitely wherever, I do the same thing, right? Wherever I can, I'm using my phone as a hotspot because it's more secure than connecting to an open Wi-Fi. Now, one of the things we taught our kids last week in cyber camp was there are tools out there that are freely available, if you know about them and know how to use them, that you can install, and it will let you see the traffic that's going over the network. So if somebody's out on a website, you can see all the packets and all the bits and pieces of information of what individuals are doing, and that's another way that data can be compromised.
Wait. Okay, back up a second. There's I can have an app on my phone that will show me what everybody in the coffee shop is doing on their computers?
Yeah, there's certain ways that you have to set it up, and yes, you can click certain things and see what people are doing and the traffic that's being sent back and forth. We call those packets of information, and yes, there are tools that do that, and they're freely available. And it's pretty well common practice in cybersecurity that we use those more for a deterrent to figure out what's out there. You can run them on your phone, and we teach the students that in college. Yeah.
Yeah, you say you use them in cybersecurity, but other people are just using them for fun, right?
They are. Yes, there's a lot of people that are using them just for fun, just because they can. So not just when you use the Wi-Fi at a lot of those places, if it's not asking for a username and password, it's not secure. That means that you can use those kinds of tools, see what information is out there, and see what's being shared. The other thing that I do and would recommend is, in addition to using using your phone as a hotspot, is a VPN.
VPN?
So VPN is another piece of software that's on your phone. Some cell phone providers will offer it through their security features. Sometimes it's a paid service. Some of them you can get for free. I always say not all things are free. Sometimes it's costing you information or other things. But definitely a VPN, what that's going to do is that's going to encrypt that traffic. So if somebody is using those tools and you're on a public Wi-Fi, that data then is encrypted and they can't read it.
We're too trusting, aren't we?
Oh, absolutely. And we give our information away all over the place.
How do you sleep at night knowing all this stuff? I mean, I'm so freaked out. I'm freaked out about this, and we haven't even touched on artificial intelligence.
Oh, my goodness.
Which is a whole other thing that when it comes to cybersecurity, right?
Yes, it is. It is scary. I'm not going to, deny that it's not. But if you're taking the necessary precautions and doing what you can and what you should to protect your information, that's how I sleep at night, is because I know I'm doing what I can and what I should. Now, that's not going to say that my information isn't going to be part of a data breach. I get the same emails that you and everybody else get that my information's been compromised. And then you go out and you change your password or get a new credit card number or things like that. That's the best that you can do as an individual.
Are there any laws that make these companies tell you about the data breaches? Because sometimes it seems like I'll get notice. Oh, hey, your information may be compromised. We had a data breach back 8 months ago. I mean, shouldn't they tell you that right when it happens?
So that's a good question. There are data breach laws. So every state in the U.S. and all of the territories have their own data breach laws. So there's 50 some out there for the U.S. They're all different by state. Some of them say you have to notify the individual. Some of them say you have to notify the attorney general. Some of them just say just put a notice out on the website so that if people come to the website because they think their information's been breached, there's a notice there of who they can contact. So that's one of the challenges, especially on organizations that have business and have customers in every state. The laws aren't all the same. And that then, to your point, also is driven by the notification period too. Some of it's generally speaking within 72 hours, but it's 72 hours within a confirmed breach. So they know right away that an incident has happened. They don't necessarily know that data has been compromised or been stolen. So that's why sometimes you're not finding out about it until many months later, because they're bringing in forensics investigators to really figure out what happened, how did they get in, what information did they get to, and they have to look through log files, and it's not an easy process.
I know that I have my phone service with AT&T, and AT&T got breached. And I ended up getting this nice letter in the mail saying, hey, sorry about that, but we're going to give you 2 years of, data protection information, identity theft information, which is nice, but it'd be nicer if they had the security on their computers in the first place.
Right. And that's probably the 15th letter that you got for now. You got 15 years of credit monitoring among all the different companies that your data's been breached. That one always makes me laugh. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And I work with a lot of companies. I have a consulting company and I work with a lot of organizations. And that's probably one of the hardest things for me is you can tell organizations, this is what the standards say. This is what laws say that apply to your business. But ultimately, it comes down to that organization doing the right thing. And oftentimes, they're looking at the cost to fix something. They're looking at what's the bottom line impact. What about the shareholders and the impact to shareholders? Because ultimately, businesses are in business to make money. Cybersecurity and a lot of the things we do don't necessarily make you money. It's to save you money. It's to build customer trust, which then in turn should help grow your organization. But not always do executives understand that or buy into that.
And not always do they hire the best people to monitor that.
That is true too. Yeah, and that's a big challenge that we see right now, just across any industry, is the need for cybersecurity professionals and technologists, because of the rapid growth of technology and the need for cyber professionals. A lot of companies are not able to find the resources that they need, so they're pulling from other areas of technology. Like me, I started my career as a software developer and then got into cyber and data privacy. As those individuals then are coming over to cyber, we still then have a gap in technology. And then cyber professionals are going over into data privacy because now data privacy is becoming a hotter topic, and which is one of the things I do as a privacy engineer, and then make sure that they're looking at the privacy side of how do I protect that data. And so it doesn't matter what area of technology you go into, any area is a great place to be because there's a need all across the board.
I just want to go to the mountains somewhere and get a cabin and be the Unabomber without the bombing. Just hide away from all of this. Okay, we talked about my phone before, right? Not the phone. I've also got the face recognition. Okay, hey, they can tell it's me because of the face recognition. Is that a good thing?
So this is what I refer to as personal risk. So it's the risk that you're willing to accept as an individual. I personally advise people to stay away from use of biometrics. And the reason why I recommend that is because if your data is compromised, you can change a password very easily. If you needed to, you can even get a new email address. Most don't, but you can. It's easy to change bank accounts. It's easy to get a new credit card. It is not easy. Actually, you can't change who you are. You can't change your DNA.
It's too late now. I've done this. And I've also done, the fingerprint, to save passwords and stuff like that on my laptop. Am I screwed now? Is that?
No, not necessarily. It's.
Can I undo that, or is that?
Yeah, you can always change it if you're using those if you're using that for authentication, you can always change it. I wouldn't say that that there's a right or wrong way. It's just what you personally want to do and the risk that you're willing to take. Now, me personally, if I don't have my biometrics out there, it can't be compromised. And so that's one thing that I try to stay away from.
The internet's forever. So,
yes.
I might be able to take it off my phone. That doesn't mean that it's not out there somewhere for somebody else.
And unfortunately, I've read a lot of breaches that have been because of biometrics.
And I thought that was safer.
Yeah, not necessarily. Another thing to keep in mind, too, and you mentioned fingerprint, if you burn your finger or something happens and now your fingerprint's different, I've actually seen those technologies fail because your fingerprint doesn't match what's on record because you've burned it or cut it or whatever. And so then now you can't get into some of those. So there's negative to that outside of just had my data compromised.
Yeah, well, I've got that, but then I do have the password protected also. But,
yep, multi-factor, which we talked about. Yeah, that's great.
So I've got that, but yeah, man, we've heard stories. I've heard stories of, an officer, arrested somebody, and they want to look in their phone, and the guy won't give them the password. Put the phone up to them, and it opens up.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's actually a violation then of their Fourth Amendment rights and other laws. Again, not a lawyer, but yeah, that's not necessarily things that they can and should be doing. But it happens.
Well, maybe I just watch too much TV.
No, we've seen that here. I mean, we see that all over where they're trying to get into a device for whatever reason, right? Maybe you were a bystander, maybe you were the person that was doing something that was bad, and we've seen a lot of instances where law enforcement's been trying to get into those devices, and you do have a right to personal protections under the Constitution and under the laws.
So, as we wrap this up, give me some hope, okay? Because I see this only getting worse. I see this becoming a bigger snowball where banks are getting compromised and businesses are being compromised and hospitals are being compromised and this becomes more and more of a mess. Is there a light at the end of the tunnel?
From organizational perspective, we're always going to have the breaches, and watching data breach reports and things like that, they're just increasing. And I've done research on that where we have an increase in laws and regs. We actually have an equal increase in breaches, which you would think it would be the opposite, right? More laws should then protect the data, which then was less breaches, but that's not what the research shows. All we can do is keep doing the right thing, right? Keep doing what we can do to control it. So make sure that you're using MFA. Make sure that if you not using public Wi-Fi, use your hotspot, VPN, strong passwords, all the things that you're doing, and checking emails before you just click on them, and reaching out to people to say, hey, did you actually send this to me, to verify that it's a legitimate email. That's the best that we can do as individuals. And then as a consultant, there's a lot of us out there that work for consulting firms going in and working with businesses to make sure that they're doing what they should be doing to protect that information. I'm excited that the privacy laws I'm hopeful that they're finally going to push for more protection on the data side, because historically what we've seen is there's not a whole lot of security laws out there that have significant ramifications if data is breached. The laws on the privacy side do. It's per record if there's a breach. So think of the Ticketmaster breach that happened, right? That's 560 million records potentially that were compromised. And if that's $7,500 per record, that's going to add up fast. And if you're a small and medium-sized business, you're not going to survive. So I'm hopeful that the data privacy laws that we see now and ours here in Nebraska will be effective in January, come 2025, that's really going to help push the security that we've been fighting for.
My problem with that is that the people that are making the laws are old guys like me who maybe have a basic knowledge but nowhere near to comprehend all the stuff you're talking about.
Right. And we do get involved. There's a lot of cyber and privacy professionals that get involved with the legislative process that help make the voices heard, because you're right, they don't always know. And you don't know what you don't know. So you bring in professionals to help with that and help advocate for those best practices in the laws.
Dr. McKee, I'll tell you, been fascinating and scary and informational and all of that. I mean, but it's, I'm not a Luddite. I'm not opposed to the technology, but it's gotten above my head now.
Yeah. And don't be alarmed by it, right? It can be overwhelming. It can be, it definitely is frustrating, right? I'm not going to tell you that it's not. But as long as you can continue to do what you can do, and that you're taking the steps that you can take to control some of those negative impacts. And then, like you mentioned, you've got LifeLock should something significant happen. That's the best that you can do. It's those individuals that are just like, whatever happens, happens, and I'm not going to do anything. And, there's a lot of those that just kind of, they just accept the fact that it's going to happen without even taking some of those precautionary steps and that are in a worse off situation.
Well, I'll tell you what, thank you for all you've done trying to help me with my Facebook situation. I want to, thank you once again for that. And by the way, I'm not selling Taylor Swift tickets, okay? This person that has my Facebook page is trying to sell Bitcoin, trying to sell, like, my dad's old truck. My dad's been dead for 15 years, and he never had a truck in the first place. Now they're selling Taylor Swift tickets, which means I got all these people saying, are you really selling Taylor Swift tickets? And I actually had a friend, actually a friend of a friend, that came this close to buying.
Yeah.
He told my friend, hey, did you see Becca's got Taylor Swift tickets? And he said, that doesn't sound right. And so my friend called me, and I said, no. But the other guy was like ready to just click and give out the credit card information. Yeah,
that's a good point that you make. Don't give out any credit card information, bank account information. And, there really shouldn't be any need to do any of that. If somebody's asking for that, that should be the very first red flag.
But what about things like Amazon? I mean, they got my credit card information.
But you're also going out to Amazon to make purchases and make transactions. And what you just described, where somebody's asking for money in an unusual transaction, those should be red flags.
Yeah. And I know nothing about that. As little as I know about computers, I know a lot less about Bitcoin. So don't buy any Bitcoin from me, or for that matter, from anybody else. Dr. McKee, thank you very much. Fascinating. Is there a place people can go to get more information like this? Is there a good website that people can go to learn more about, keeping themselves safe?
There's actually a lot of resources out there. So the Better Business Bureau has some really good resources, especially for organizations. I have a lot of information that I put on my LinkedIn page. So Dr. Lisa McKee on LinkedIn. And then just, reach out. And my email address is drmckee@comprosec.com.
All right. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, we'll talk again.
Thank you.
Till next time, thanks for listening to Becca's Talking.